Amsterdam is known as the cycling capital of the world. The whole city is planned around riding a bike as the main form of commuter transport. But it wasn't always this way. Much like Australian cities, cars used to be the primary way to get around. But a series of government-led policies over the last few decades has changed the way transport is structured in the Dutch capital. Uber Australia is now exploring ways to reduce Australia's reliance on cars. Our reporter Steph Nash visited Amsterdam as a guest of Uber to see what we can learn from the Dutch.
This is Amsterdam, a city known for its rich history, its museums, the home of the works of the Dutch masters like Rembrandt and Van Gogh, its canals, its liberal way of life, and of course, bikes. The city of Amsterdam, like many communities in the Netherlands, has prioritised biking culture as the main form of human transportation. 63% of the population use their bike on a daily basis. For getting to work, taking the kids to school, doing the shopping, it's a way of life, thanks to a very strict, very carefully orchestrated set of urban planning measures.
This city really believes in governance. So we have 350 designers working permanently for the city. That's unique. Even in the Netherlands, that's unique. So it depends on the sort of social culture and the political culture of the city.
Ruan Alvahare is a landscape architect and is a senior chief urban designer for the municipality of Amsterdam. He says that the biking mecca that is now present in the city is a result of over 50 years of lobbying, planning and construction.
We believe in pedestrians and cyclists foremost. Because cycling is it's almost a way of life here, which you obviously probably have noticed. It was a very car-oriented city till 1990, when we started proposing policies to actually reduce the amount of cars, especially parked cars, in the city to increase more pedestrian green spaces.
The Dutch have completely changed the psychology of urban planning. Everything has been designed with the bicyclist in mind. It can all be summarised by this sign, which roughly translated means Bike Street. The car is a guest.
It's a rethinking of what our streets are for. And the car is at the centre of that rethinking.
Meredith Glazer is the Executive Director of the Urban Cycling Institute in the Netherlands. She has seen how the concept of biking has been used by governments in Amsterdam as a tool for changing other things. By leaning into the culture of biking, policymakers were able to start solving problems related to human safety, housing, productivity and sustainability.
We need to connect cycling and walking to movements around our health, our well-being, the economy, the climate. These are the issues at stake, and the bicycle is what's called a boundary object. It's a lens that we can use to look at all these different issues in our cities.
With the Dutch heralding the benefits of redistributing the space on our roads, geared more towards cycling and walking, it begs the question, can it be done here in Australia? It's something that Uber is investigating.
We ultimately want to try and ensure that Uber has the lowest possible impact on the planet. And we can do that through shifting cars to electric or other forms of low carbon technology. But if we just replace all the cars that exist today with all the cars of tomorrow, we haven't really solved the wider challenge of how do you think about a city being the best possible place to live.
Despite our sprawling landscapes and challenging terrain, our cities are making some strides towards better bike safety and efficiency. Given that we already have some supporting infrastructure, Uber Australia decided to conduct a social experiment. Can everyday Australians forego the use of their cars? It's called the One Less Car Experiment. Over 5 weeks, a combination of singles, families and empty nesters from cities around the country attempted to prioritise biking, walking, public transport and rideshare over the use of their car. And the results were encouraging. All 58 participants were able to effectively reduce their car dependency by supplementing their routines with other modes of transport. But there were some challenges.
I think it was just interesting to kind of be a little bit more aware, I think, of how we use our car and what other modes of transport are available.
Josh was one of Uber's participants. Based in Queenscliff in Sydney's northern beaches, He diverted to biking, skateboarding and walking for his short trips. He also used public transport for his daily commute and rented a car some weekends for longer journeys.
I think it was more just being aware of where we were using our car and thinking ahead, kind of, I think with public transport, kind of just planning ahead, giving yourself enough time and just being a little bit more aware of where you needed to be and what modes of transport. I think sometimes in Sydney it can be hard to figure out how to get somewhere by public transport, but I think once you get a hang of things, it's definitely doable to go without the car.
Josh learned that biking around Sydney can be physically challenging. To help cater for the hilly landscape, Uber gave participants access to electric bikes with sizable storage attachments, such as the lug and carry bike.
Getting around with bikes in Sydney in certain areas can be fantastic, but I think there's still a long way to go with cycle paths in Sydney. It's also just a very hilly city, I think, compared to some of the other kind of bike capitals of the world. It's great kind of for me riding my bike down to the wharf, but to get back up is a little bit of a struggle. I kind of ride halfway home and then kind of chuck my bike on the rails up the stairs and push it up 200 or 300 stairs to get up the hill. But with the use of the lug and carry bike that we had over the course of the trial, that was great. It just meant I could pedal straight up the hills.
Uber Australia's head of sustainability, Anna Paula Brito, says she was pleased with the results.
I think it really showed that we don't have to wait for some future to start doing this, but a lot of people can start having lower car dependency today.
In order to make Australia a better place to get around, we need to take a note from the Dutch and rethink the allocation of space on our streets.
All these tools have been used in the past to prioritize private car ownership and storage of cars, and I think we can do a lot better and start shifting towards things that make our cities more livable and redistribute the use of that space in a better and more efficient way for everyone.
So how to do it? The first step is policy engagement, seeking interest and funding from state governments. But how open will our policymakers be to this sort of planning overhaul? Former head of Infrastructure Australia and current CEO of Engineers Australia, Romilly Mathew, says there is a way forward.
I think it really is possible in Australia, and when we consider COVID, the number of people buying bikes and using bikes really increased. And we all know the health benefits of bikes, but we need to do a couple of things in Australia if we're going to look at what they've done in Netherlands and really increase the number of people feeling safe to use a bike. And I think that's what it really comes down to, is feeling safe. Is we've got to look at our infrastructure. We've got to look at how bike lanes, are aligned with roads and the safety of that. So then that picks up the funding models. That also then picks up planning and making sure we have really complementary planning to support increase in bike use in Australia. And then the other one is really the campaign around the benefits of using bikes.
Funding might be a problem, but it's a short-term pain, long-term gain scenario.
All infrastructure budgets are being really challenged at the moment across Australia and globally as well. But we've also got to look at the health benefits and the economic benefits of using bikes. The case after case after case has shown and illustrated the benefits of using bikes.
Looking to Amsterdam, governments are very in touch with the grassroots movements of their citizens.
You could say it's sort of typical Amsterdam, that the sort of Uber democracy, that the sort of play between bottom-up movements and top-down movements come together to actually start pursuing policies.
Saskia Kluwert is a senator for the Dutch Parliament. She's spent a lot of her career working towards implementing safe infrastructure in cities to prioritise human mobility. Funding for infrastructure in the Netherlands is almost fully paid for by the government.
If you save money on your infrastructure, you actually a lot of people get hurt because of that. So I don't think it's fiscal prudent to save on infrastructure. There's a lot of things you can save on, but I would never save on safe infrastructure. It saves you money to have good infrastructure.
What works for the Netherlands is how cities are being built to cater for a dense population. Access to employment hubs, public transport, schools, shops are all designed to be in very short proximity to people's houses. There is no urban sprawl like we have here at home.
I think it's not so much a challenge, but it's an opportunity and a place that we should be looking at. Of like, we have all this land that's already being used for cars. Like, how can we reuse it better to house people and bring people closer and not always build out? And I think a lot of cities have started thinking about that. You look at the master plans for Parramatta, master plans for Melbourne, master plan for a lot of different cities. They talk a lot about this building where existing infrastructure exists rather than always continuing to build out. So that we're not forcing people to live far away from where they want to be and not forcing people into car ownership if they don't need to or want to.
Using the framework of social cost benefit analysis, that active mobility, walking, cycling is one of the most efficient ways of getting around, especially when we're talking about urban environments. And I think that's an important context to delineate, is that it's, we're talking about an urban environment where accessibility to restaurants, cafes, to leisure, sports, but also essential activities, school, work, these types of places, should be within close distance.
So how do you deter people from using their cars?
The main instrument has been just making cars more expensive. So if you imagine, I think in 1980s we started doing parking charges. It was something like 10 cents per hour. And in the city centre now it's €7 an hour.
While other parts of the world look towards taxing their citizens' private cars, the Dutch model is about restricting access to space.
Alas, we don't have congestion charge yet. I think we should have it, but it's mostly parking policies. And we also have European policies on cleaner cars, which in the early stages also led to smaller cars, for example. Now we have, with the e-cars, a bit growth of the size of cars again. But it's mostly road dieting, less parking spaces, paying for your park space. That is a very effective policy to get in more space for cycling and walking.
I think it'd be probably a good thing. I mean, for us, we don't use our car a lot anyway, compared to some people, I think. And I think, kind of putting the cost back on people who are using their cars every day for kind of trips into the city, especially when there are other options. I mean, I lived in the UK for a little while, and you have that kind of congestion tax for the inner kind of part of the city, which I think works really well.
Whatever policy levers we decide to use, Romilly Madju says it will need to be more broadly impacting to be successful.
You actually need an ecosystem of responses. You just can't use one hard response. It's not fair on all of society if you just take a really blunt instrument. And so that could be reducing car parks, but also reducing the cost of public transport, making it much easier to use your bike, ensuring that you have end-of-trip facilities. So you really do need a package of levers, incentives and legislation and rules to really reduce the number of cars being used and increase the opportunity for people to be using other transport.
For now, the experts encourage baby steps, short trips that can be readily achieved by citizens by using existing infrastructure.
Up to something like 60% of trips are below 5 kilometers. So those are those are the low-hanging fruit.
It made me think about kind of those little kind of run-around trips to the shops where you'd normally just not think about it, jump in a car, and choosing to kind of walk or ride a bike, I think was definitely a good option, and I think something that I've taken away from the experiment, that just getting out and enjoying kind of the area that we live in, and not using your car for those, especially those short trips, was definitely an added bonus of the experiment, and definitely something I've taken away from that.
For everyday people, the benefits of greater mobility are obvious. Better health, better lifestyle, greater productivity, perhaps even more money in your pocket when saving on fuel and car maintenance costs.
I'd need to sit down and kind of do the numbers, but it definitely made me a little bit more aware of the cost of the car, the cost of fuel, and just seeing where we could make little changes.
While it might not be ready to sell your car for scrap just yet, baby steps appear to be underway to help encourage some big changes in our cities.
I'd say I'm still slightly hesitant. I think just for the ease and convenience and emergency kind of situations, having a car there is definitely a great kind of safety net. I think I could survive pretty well without it. But I think, yeah, just it would take some getting used to not having a car to fall back on.